So that's my message, especially to the younger generation of scientists. You are the future. And I know that's just often people say that and it sounds like a graduation speech or something, but it really is true. You are the leaders. If you are in a faculty research job, you have a significant chance of being in leadership in the future of where grants and science goes. And I really encourage you to choose very carefully what precedents and habits you set for yourself now, and really choose them for the long term, not just for short-term reactivity, because this phase too shall pass someday. Hey, I haven't made a video in a while now, and it's been like a tough time with all this stuff going on here, like just talking about science careers, talking about grants. It seems like when the world is burning, in a sense, for academia and for research, that it's just like, wow, what do I even say? How can I present as optimistic and enthusiastic when I'm not feeling it? Like, sometimes I haven't been. I'm getting back, though, to a place where it's time to start sharing again, and time to bring, I at least have some more personal enthusiasm. Now, that may seem like bizarre, given that things out there aren't looking any better right now. I mean, the attacks on science and academia are continuing unabated, and just things for people who are paying attention don't look really good at the moment. So it can seem bleak, but I want to give a bit of a counter to that, especially for the younger researchers out there, of how important your role is. And that's really what I want to talk about today, because I think your role is just so critical at this point in time. I was talking to a client today, and it's part of working on grants with clients. And we were talking about the pressure that this client was feeling from some senior colleagues to just submit another proposal. And I have ranted about that whole thing many times in the past, like how the math doesn't work of this, just submit as soon and as often as you can. I've done mathematics on it. I actually made a video called The Hardest Decision that goes through this really analytically. It doesn't work math-wise, and it doesn't work sanity-wise, and yet there's still so much pressure. And so what I was saying to this person, because the person was sort of torn between that pressure that they were feeling from senior colleagues and stuff versus this sort of internal drive to produce something that's really quality. And that's something we've focused on in our programs more and more, especially focusing on the quality of the scientific idea, like how important that quality actually is to getting funded, but not only to getting funded, but to establishing a real clear brand reputation, like establishing who you are in your community, especially if you're a newer investigator. And though it is true that you could just sit there and submit proposals, and through sheer luck, you could maybe call it force of will, you could occasionally get one funded, what is that doing to your reputation? Like, overall, if people see a lot of kind of not very good proposals from you that aren't worth funding, and then occasionally they see something that they're like, oh, it squeaks over the line, what does that do compared to really showing up with just a compelling, awesome proposal that reviewers are so excited, and they go into a study section meeting or review panel meeting and they're excited to support? It's such a difference in terms of they will remember that one that lit them up, that got them excited. They will remember who you are, who that person was, because after I had done that very thing, after I had turned things around, I started having people come up to me and say, oh, I remember that. I saw your proposal, and they didn't say whether they were reviewers or not, but they admitted they were on the study section. I had multiple people, and really my reputation grew quickly just through those grants. So, but that's not the main thing I wanted to talk about here, because I wanted to talk about the pressures that continue from so many people to do the opposite. And I really went on a little bit of a rant with this client, not against the client per se, but against the system. And I tried to make that clear to the client. I wasn't attacking them. I was attacking like the system. That it's the system seems like it kind of went a little bit bonkers, a little bit insane. It just got to this point where people are submitting grant proposals just because, quote, I need funding, so I'm going to do whatever it takes, including just submitting stuff that I'm not really interested in, research that I'm not really interested in doing, but I'm going to submit stuff for it anyway, just because there is a special RFA for it, or because whatever, because I think I have a better chance of getting this stuff I'm not even interested in funded, and at least I'll have funding. And there's so much of a craziness that has infected the system. I think about my father's era, and he was that era before the baby boomers. I think it's named the silent generation. And in that generation, it was truly all about the science. Now, it wasn't as competitive by any means back then. I mean, it was still had some competition, but I remember my father poring over grant proposals and really working hard on them. And he had a big lab, it was well funded, especially for a chemistry lab. Like, this wasn't like some mainly NIH funded thing. He did have some NIH funding, but it was like all about chemical separations techniques. And he still had a big, well funded lab from that. And he spent time really developing the ideas. And I remember even conversations and learning from him. It was like a thing, and it just seems like that has shifted more and more. Like, when I work with people these days, it's not, and even when I was at UNC Chapel Hill in the 2002 through 2011 time frame, and then Boise State a few years after that, not that many people were excited and having those deeper conversations and really developing the quality science. I mean, there were a few of my colleagues who were kind of the outliers who really were interested in that level of quality. And I was fortunate enough to encounter one of them. He was, I've mentioned this before, but he ended up being my grant mentor and was a friend of a Nobel laureate. And he was really into quality science and quality proposals and quality everything. But so much of like the baby boom generation, I don't want to make it a total blanket statement, because anytime you make a blanket statement about any group of any kind, then somebody's going to accuse you of bias. But I would say as a group, the baby boomers are more about expediency. And then my generation, the Generation X, is even more about like just expedience, just get the result. Who cares about how you do it or whatever? You just got to get the result. You just got to survive. It's kind of a really cynical attitude that my generation grew up with. I have fallen into that in the past and still sometimes get sucked back into that. But I really try to not go there because it's such an unhealthy mental place and it's just not fun. And in the long run, you don't build things that last that way. And science should be a thing that lasts, like where you are contributing to a long line of science of people who built ideas and concepts before you, and then you add to that stack of ideas your own unique contributions and ideas that builds and sometimes overturns the previous stuff. But just the fact that there was the previous stuff that you overturned is still valuable in that case, because if you didn't have the previous thing to say, oh no, that's wrong, you might not have done the work that you did that overturned it, right? So in any case, you're building and building, and then the next generation, like if you build something that lasts, that has lasting value, lasting interest, even if it eventually gets overturned, you're making that contribution. You're building something that the next generation and the one after that can build on. And when we get trapped in all this short-term thinking, this just rush, and just get the funding and just get the publication so that you can just survive and please the system. It's like, when did we become, instead of scientists and researchers, like people, bureaucracy-pleasing machines? Like, what is the frickin' deal with that? That's the reason the real fundamental reason. There were several, but the biggest one that I left my tenured position at UNC Chapel Hill is I heard the medical school dean say at one point, you guys got to get more grants because the medical school is in big debt and we need that money to help cover that debt. And I was like, wait, I'm just a money generating machine for the debt of, it wasn't the medical school, it was the debt of the hospital that he was referring to. And I'm like, I'm not here to be a money generating machine. If I'm going to be a money generating machine, I'll go do my own business to do that, which was the motivation for doing a business, although it hasn't really been like the money generating machine anyway. But that's a whole separate side story. Maybe I'll tell that story another time. So, like, when did we become pawns in this machine? It's like ridiculous. Instead of actually just scientists who really care about the science, even when it comes to funding and grants. There's a small cadre of people who just seem to have no problems getting funding, who have multiple R01s. And I think there are one of two things that happen. They're either people who are really focused on the quality and just producing great ideas and putting them into writing and making sure that they're great ideas going out, or there are people who just have figured out how to game the system and they have they've got built a reputation through their networking and their glad handing and whatever. I've never been that kind of person who's like really good at that networking and schmoozing enough to rely on that for my career. But I really did, like, over time, especially after the intervention of my mentor, shift from, oh, I need to just rush and submit, into this mode of taking my time and doing quality. And it paid off big time. It really did. There's just no doubt in the numbers. If you look at my numbers and what happened, the quality paid off. The investing in the long term and the investing in deeper science that hopefully mattered to some degree in the time that I was there. Back to my example of this person I was working with and just the challenge interacting with this system that's just pressuring, submit, put in another thing, just run the experience, see what kind of feedback you get, just submit another thing. And I think that there are people who are afraid might get stuck in perfectionism or something, but I don't know what they're afraid of. But I've seen this, it's not just this one person, it's so many discussions I've had with so many clients over the years of the same kind of thing, of like, just submit, just get something out there. It doesn't really, it matters, but it doesn't really matter as long as you get the funding. And so just submit more because you'll get more funding, which is not true. And so here's really the crux of this point. When I was ranting about how broken the system is, I'm like, okay, you, speaking to my client and now speaking to you out there in the interwebs land, you need to understand your potential role here. You are this next generation that's coming in to replace these baby boomers and the Gen Xers who are in charge. Like the baby boomers, many of them are on their way out. Gen Xers are starting to move out, starting to retire. I think the leading wave of Gen Xers will start to retire in 3 to 5 years. And then there will be a big wave of retirements. Well, not big because we're not a big generation, but there will be a wave of retirements of Gen X, and then it will be Millennials and Gen Z. And it's like, you guys will get to define what the future looks like for science and for research. You guys will be in charge. And you've got to set the groundwork now. You can't just wait until like somebody hands you the reins and then you're like, wait, what do I do? And you've been doing this stuff that really didn't work all along, and now you're habituated to the old broken crap. And I think now more than ever, this is so important, because while it's very unfortunate that all of this stuff is being torn down, that academia and science is being attacked, it's also an opportunity, because there will be a point at which we rebuild something. I don't know if in the United States, if we'll ever be able to rebuild what we had. Maybe not. I don't know. But we'll probably rebuild something. Hopefully, rebuild something. And it's that generation, those next generations, that are going to be the main people who will be doing that rebuilding. So you got to be thinking about it now. Who do you want to be? What do you want to rebuild? What do you want science and research to look like? Do you want it to look like this, this mess that it has become before this? Or do you want it to be something better? And you can't just wait until the opening is clear to you. You've got to establish that now, like in yourself, in your habits, in your ways of thinking, in your ways of operating. Establish that now, not wait until you're 20 years in and you're habituated and now it is really uncomfortable to change. Believe me, as you get older, changing is harder. And I'm one of the more flexible people that I know in terms of changing, even at my age as a Gen Xer. This is the most important point, is realizing that you may not feel like, if you're a millennial scientist, you may not feel like you have a lot of power to change things or to do things, but you can start leading the way. Because especially for the millennials out there, you're a much bigger generation than Gen X. And there are not enough of us to run things once the baby boomers are fully out and retired out of the picture. There just aren't enough of us to do it. So it's going to fall on the next generation, millennials, which is a bigger generation than us, to really lead the charge, and especially coinciding with whenever we get the chance to finally start rebuilding some stuff after this stuff that's going on that could get worse before it gets better. So take that power. Start thinking about that now. What do you want science to be? What do you want your career to be? I mean, I've been encouraging this for people for 15 years to think about what do you want your career to be and how do you create a more balanced and enjoyable and meaningful career for yourself. How do you do that? And I've been talking about it for a long time, but now it's actually more important than ever. Instead of getting into all this panic and worry of oh, well, what am I going to do or whatever. The problem with panic-based decisions is that they're always short-term and reactive decisions, and they never lead, or almost never lead, to great long-term outcomes. And, if you just accept that we're in for kind of a messy, wild ride, which that's one of the reasons I'm more optimistic now, is I've just accepted that. I've finally come to the point where, whatever happens here in the US and the ramifications of that, it's probably going to be messy for a while. And I'm accepting that. It's going to be messy, but then there will come a point when we get to rebuild, and there's where the optimism comes in, is let's rebuild something better. We've seen even more clearly than ever recently what doesn't work. So let's figure it out and move into building something that does work. So that's my message, especially to the younger generation of scientists. You are the future. And I know that's just often people say that and it sounds like a graduation speech or something and some hollow, empty thing, but it really is true. You are the leaders. If you are in a faculty research job, you have a significant chance of being in leadership in the future of where things like grants and science and all of that goes. And I really encourage you to choose very carefully what precedents and habits you set for yourself now, and really choose them for the long term, not just for short-term reactivity. Because this phase too shall pass someday, hopefully sooner than later, but someday it will pass. And it will be you there. All right. Well, I hope that helps. Please please subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. This is Dr. Morgan Giddings for SciFoundry, signing off.